Welcome, everybody. We're back in Amy Barn. I am Colonel Tim Nye, and I've got on my left Joe De Sena. On my right, I've got Sephra Alexandra and Johnny Waite. What we've got here for you today is that all right?
Yeah, no,
it's a great interview with a retired lieutenant colonel, good friend of mine, Scott Mann, an SF legend. This is a guy that kind of changed the way we were doing business fighting the war in Afghanistan by taking a look at how we were training the Afghans, and he decided it was wrong, and we needed to put our trust in the Afghan tribes, and he moved out into the villages and put his safety and security in their hands. So when he went to sleep at night, he was being guarded by local tribesmen. Really kind of Lawrence of Arabia, kind of Magnificent Seven, if you know those movies. So anyway, he's a fascinating guy. I think we should go listen to Joe interview him, and then we'll come back and see what you guys think.
We are here for Spartan Up Podcast with Scott Mann at Riverside Farm in Vermont while the Agoge is taking place. Scott, Green Beret?
Yep.
How many years?
Let's see, 23 years in the Army, almost 23, and about 18 of that as a Green Beret.
Wow. And you were like, I don't get offended by it, like a badass. You've done some amazing things over there. Anybody in the military is badass, but you did some incredible things that now have turned into a leadership program?
Yeah, you know, I always like to say I got to hang out with a lot of badasses, and I took really good notes. Everything I learned about leadership, I learned about the non-commissioned officers and the warrant officers that trained me and mentored me. And I took really good notes, and I watched how those guys would go into trust-depleted villages, conflict-riddled areas, and they would establish relationships and rebuild trust at like a bottom-up level. And over time would inspire, tribal people to go up on rooftops and fight alongside them with no authority, very few resources, and really stand up on their own. And then we would move on. And, that just resonated with me, Joe, over the years as a form of leadership that we could sure use here in America again. And I started calling it rooftop leadership. So that's what I train and teach today, whether it's nonprofit work or corporate work, is all about relationship-based leadership.
But you were 14 years old when you got into it. I mean, you didn't have this on your mind. Let's go way back.
Yeah, sure.
So 14 years old, you just mentioned
Yeah, I lived in a little logging town in Arkansas. It reminds me a lot of this. And one day a Green Beret walked into our soda shop, and it was like the dude just walked off a recruiting poster. And as soon as I saw him,
in uniform?
In uniform, like cardboard, these big old shiny boots. And I was like, that is what I'm going to do. I have no idea what that is, but that's me. And the guy ended up mentoring me until I retired. His name was Mark. But I just fell in love with this whole notion, because I was a little runt of a kid, and this notion of being able to go into places and help people stand up on their own against oppression. Little guy against big guy, I like that a lot. And just the whole Lawrence of Arabia feel of that approach really was attractive to me.
How hard was it for you to get in?
Terribly hard. It was, for one, I was, again, just a little dude. And it was, the entry requirements to get into Special Forces are very demanding, very exacting. But I loved it so much. I mean, it was just everything to me. It was, I felt like I would die if I didn't do it. And so even in the toughest of times, it was like you were telling the guys on the mountain last night at the Agoge, it's all up here. When it all came down to it, was just how much do you want it? And that's what got me through.
And so we talk a lot about true north, about knowing who you want to be, where you want to go in life. You knew at 14.
I knew at 14, and I think that is so critical for every leader today, even leaders without titles, is you can be the biggest badass in the world. You can have all the talent, all the skill, but if you don't know what you're about and what you're here to do, my dad calls it leaving tracks. You're really not relevant. And so I knew at 14, and I told my boys when I retired. And I had, guys sitting in front of me at my retirement ceremony who were wounded, who had gotten scuffed up doing what I asked them to do. And I got to look at each one of them and say, you know what? I was able to live the life of a 14-year-old boy, the dream of a 14-year-old boy. And that's a pretty cool thing.
Pretty cool thing. Explain leaving tracks.
Yeah, so that's one of my rooftop leadership tenets. And my dad he was a forester. So he would always take us out in the woods, my brother and me, and he would say things like, boys, I don't care, what you do with your life, who you marry, make sure you leave your tracks in this world. And he was really talking about those indelible impressions that each of us is capable of leaving that don't even serve the people around us, they serve the people who follow us. And what I found is that the real leaders who have a sense of themselves like that, who are leaving things in the earth behind them for the benefit of people who follow, that's what people respond to today when it comes to leadership. That's who we follow. That's who we're drawn to. And I think it's what we're here to do.
So you're in the military. You got this great background from your dad, right? And you're having a tough time, but you get through. Then what? Get us to.
So most of my career in Special Forces, and late in the Afghan War, we were really, in 2010, we were really losing bad. And so I was fortunate.
How old are you at that point?
At this point, I was a lieutenant colonel in Special Forces.
Okay.
So and we needed a new approach to the war, and so a handful of us were selected to design and implement kind of an old school strategy, a Magnificent Seven style strategy, a Lawrence of Arabia strategy of getting back into the villages and helping these tribes stand up on their own. And I was fortunate enough to be heavily involved in that, and we changed the game. I wrote a book on it called Game Changers, and it was all bottom-up leadership, relationship-based, restoring trust, storytelling, actions and deeds on the rooftop when no one else would go up the ladders.
But you're at a base right now with a bunch of your own.
Yep.
And you've got this idea, or the group of you have this idea that you're going to go integrate with guys that could be the enemy.
Yeah, for sure. And
how do you take that step?
And there was a ton of resistance even within NATO, Joe. I mean, this was 2010. I mean, we were already talking about pulling out and coming home.
Right.
So even in convincing our own leadership that this approach needed to happen. And again, it goes back to that true north. It was able to have a vision and convey that vision through narrative and story of what could be. And we had a few true believers who slapped the table and bought in, and then we moved into these villages, only 6, who were reluctantly willing to take us in and let us live there. But at the end of the day, what it came down to is when the bullets started flying, going up those ladders and defending that community and doing what we said we would do. And then over time, that word spread. People started standing up, and before we were, done, within 18 months, 113 villages had stood up on their own. The program was funded for $500 million by Congress, and it's still in place today.
Wow. So how does it feel to be part of that and you left tracks?
Yeah, well, my son Cody was 3 when the towers fell, and now he's on his path to become a Green Beret, much like Tim's son, who already is. And so for that, I, more than anything, to know that my son has something that he can fall back on that I saw work very well. He doesn't have the same BS strategy I had when we first started this war. So that feels really good. And also, I think because I've learned so many of these lessons about leadership and trust and storytelling that I can now teach leaders here in America. I can help our veterans come home, learn to tell their stories in transition. That hat you're wearing there, the Hero's Journey nonprofit. So it's permeated into all aspects of life here. And I think just the little secrets we use as Green Berets in those rough places to inspire people to stand up on their own work here.
Well, that's what I'm going to say. There's a lot of viewers out there that are looking to be better. Yeah. Better moms, better dads, whatever it is that they're trying to achieve in life. How do we take some of the lessons you've learned over these 20 plus years and the rooftops to your own life? 3 things, I believe. Leave tracks in this world. Ask yourself, who would hold your hand in the last breath you take on this earth? And 15 years after you've passed, what would this person say about the tracks that you left behind? Write that down and make that your true north. That's number 1. Number 2, I believe you got to connect deeply. We have to get back to the element of human connections as leaders. We can't admire the problem from afar. We have to immerse in it and lead from the bottom up. And number 3, I think we have to lead with our story. We've lost the art of storytelling and articulating vision to people, and story is one of the greatest ways that we can do that. And they've done studies that show that the greatest leaders on the planet are ones who have vision and are able to articulate it through story. So leave tracks, connect deeply, and lead with your story.
I hope you're not sitting still while you listen. If you are, you better get a burpee break in.
All right, so you're just the average Joe out there, you're watching this, or Jane, right. and you're trying to figure out how to apply that. Like, how do you tell stories? How do you get better at telling stories?
Yes. So we're all natural storytellers, right? But I'll give you an example with your agoge that's going on up at the mountain. Yesterday, I went up there, and the instructors were smoking them. They were spent. They sat down on their packs, and I got in front of them. And so I'm thinking, okay, what can I possibly say at this moment that's going to resonate with them being this tired? Sure. And so what I did was I told him a story. I told him a story about a guy named Romy Camargo, a warrant officer who was shot through the neck in Afghanistan and who was one of my guys and who managed to come off the battlefield with his teammates giving him a tracheotomy, breathing for him under fire in the back of a vehicle, coming through a river, and how he now runs a nonprofit center in Tampa for spinal cord injuries, right? And what I talked about was within that narrative, Joe, was the power of team. The only reason Romy came off that battlefield and the only reason that 2 veterans today have walked as a result of that spinal cord injury center is because what his team did under fire. And it's the same timeless principles of leadership and teamwork that those guys and gals up at the Agoge would have to show last night and today to finish. Right. And so I used narrative to add meaning and memory on timeless lessons, and it hits you right in the solar plexus. And you can use PowerPoint slides and speeches all day long, but stories 100,000 years old, and it lands right here.
So if you're out there and you're trying to inspire your family, your coworkers, whatever, get some stories under your belt, I guess.
Talk about where you've been. Yeah. If you're a mom or a dad or even a boss and you want to inspire people to move to action, talk about your miles and scars and what you've been through, how you've been scuffed up, what you've learned along the way, and where you're going. People appreciate struggle. That's where we find each other. That's where we connect with each other.
You're authentic then, right?
Authentic and transparent.
Throw away the ego, good or bad, just get it out there.
That's what we're drawn to.
When I got out of college, I had seen an advertisement for Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. So I signed up for it, got out of my comfort zone, and I went, and they taught you how to tell stories.
Absolutely.
How to get in front of people.
Yep, we are narrative creatures, and what's interesting is that the more modern we get and the more connected we get, the more people thirst for story. So, storytellers, people who can really move people to action through narrative, they're the ones that are going to crush it because we're just drawn to that. And in the age of selfies, We're hungry for people who can tell a story and inspire us to action.
I'm going to send my kids to hang out with you for a while and learn how to tell a story.
Bring them down to Florida. That's where we run our at Mann camp.
By the way, the true north, right, leaving tracks, the way you described how to do it was the most succinct way I'd heard, because it's really hard for people to figure out where they want to go in life and who they want to be.
It's so true. And I really learned it was when my dad's battle with stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. He had talked about it our whole life, and you know how you are with your dad. You're like, yeah, whatever. But it was in that moment when he was about, he was going through hard chemotherapy. And I kind of broke down and I wasn't ready to lose him. And he just said, Scotty, I've left my tracks, son. It's going to be all right. And he ended up making it through and he's in remission. But it was in that moment when I realized what he meant by leaving tracks. And it's not even about us. It's not even about those around us. It's those who follow us.
Sure.
You lead from that place and people will run through walls for you.
We should leave some tracks today. Maybe you and I will go up that mountain.
I'd love it.
All right, let's, for those of us that didn't get it, they can follow up with the book.
Yeah, so one of the things that leaving tracks for me is helping our veterans transition home. And another mutual friend that we have, Phil Randazzo of American Dream U, his nonprofit and my nonprofit, The Hero's Journey, we combined my book, Mission America, and his book, Mission Next. And we're giving these away to veterans all over the country as we travel around on the American Dream U stage. We're giving these away. And this book, Phil interviewed 40 veterans who've transitioned. Wow. And he created this composite character that goes through transition. So it's like a strategic guide. And then my experience was what I went through personally in transition. And it was a rough time for a couple of years. And what I learned along the way. So it's like a tactical roadmap for guys and girls that are getting out of the military. Because it's like changing planets, Joe, when you leave the military. Sure. So these 2 books, we're giving them away to warriors, and we've already gotten amazing feedback that it's helping them with transition because we have 20,000 a month coming out, and there's not a lot of resources out there, and we got to get this stuff to them. Otherwise, we're losing valuable resources that our country needs.
Awesome. So if you're out there, get this book.
You know what I loved about that? I mean, there's a ton of good stuff he had to talk about, and you guys will pull pieces out of it. He talked about how as technology moves forward and we have so much available to us, how people crave actual connection and storytelling. And I love that he is finding a way to, as he says, help the families and the service members to tell their story in a powerful way. And we've had a number of people in the podcast recently, whether it was Jeff Gomez, who, that's the art of storytelling as a producer. Ben Weiss, exactly. It's all about how do you tell your story? How do you do it in a way that engages people? And that Scott is using his experiences and
how you want your story to be told.
And create helping people create their narrative. It was really, really powerful for me.
Whenever this airs, the Agoge just ended, and I heard a ton of feedback from everyone out there that what he had to say was really inspirational and really getting them motivated. And he talks a lot about his rooftop leadership concept, which I thought was fascinating. I mean, you being, I don't know what the roofs look like in Afghanistan, but
generally made out of mud.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. Hey, listen, he's another one of these guys. I'll get back to Rooftop in a minute, but he's another one of these guys. He reminds me a lot of you, Joe. I mean, he's got this drive and he's got this energy. And I first met him in Afghanistan in 2009 to 2010. He ended up staying much later because he was kind of the driving force behind this new policy. But he is one of those guys who can actually, he doesn't sleep. So he doesn't think you sleep or don't need to sleep or whatever.
Joe, do you sleep?
That's what I'm saying. He's one of these guys, so much energy and so much passion and drive. It's just he's trying to get the mission done. And the clock means absolutely nothing to him, So he would at 2 a.m. say, hey, do you have that thing? I'm going to need it. Say, well, no, I'm sleeping. I mean, I'm sleeping here, right? I mean, you can see I'm sound asleep. Yeah, but I'm going to need that in an hour. Why? Well, because I'm working on it. Okay, but I'm not. I'm sleeping. So, but that's just a single-minded focus that he and a lot of these other guys have, right?
It was. I woke up this morning at 1:30. By 5, I've lost my mind. I've already sent all the emails I can. I've already done burpees. I've exercised. I'm waiting for people to show up. I turned the lights on in the bedroom. Courtney's sleeping. It reminded me of the conversation. Yeah. I'm like, hey, don't forget, the kids got to do Kumon. We got to get this place. She goes, 5 a.m. Why do we have to do that now?
But that's what it takes, right? It takes that kind of.
You don't sleep till I sleep.
But it takes that kind of personality when you're moving an idea forward, right? Ideas are hard to move forward. You got to convince everybody. You got to show them. I mean, again, he believed how the U.S. military, or specifically the Special Forces guys, were not. Their approach wasn't correct, and so he got him and a handful of other guys, some generals, General Reeder, General Miller, a couple other guys to buy into this thing. Or who was it that said not buy in but believe in?
Believe in.
Yeah, believe in.
The unbelief. You're talking about buy.
Right, but that's a great phrase there, right? So he got these guys that they all believed in this, and so it moved forward. And as he talks about there, he went from just a handful of villages to when he left 113 or 130 villages. And what he's talking about is that those villages were rising up against the Taliban on their own by just having a couple of Americans in there to help them. And that's, these Americans are going in and putting their, like I say, safety and security in these local Afghans' hands. And when they got to sleep, so at some point at night you're laying down and you're trusting the people around you.
I think
that's a lot of belief.
I think that's the best tactic, right? I mean, I think whenever you go and whenever my brother goes into do disaster response or things like that, he always talks about empowering the indigenous capacity, like looking at what your local resources are and then aligning with them, right? Rather than trying to build obstacles and to have to reinvent a wheel that's already there. It's the same thing. I'm working on starting a seed bank down in Haiti, right? But I'm not going in saying, this is how you do it. This is where the seeds, I want to be the face of it, saying, who are the agronomists? Who is already saving these seeds? Where are these resources? Where do the buildings already exist? And when you can go in and you can identify those resources, it's like in permaculture. It's like you look at the resources around you and then you design a system that can be a closed loop, self-regenerating, self-maintaining, self-functioning system. And when you can do that, you're not only creating an operational strategy that's much more effective, it's more efficient, and it's also more cost effective because you're not pouring in all these inputs. You're just seeing what you already have. Boom.
No, that's right.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Right.
And then...
so when you're ready to move with Sapphire down to Haiti...
Oh, yeah.
The
hero's journey.
Scott's charity.
Yeah, let's go check. Yep.
Yeah. And,
hero's journey.
Go ahead, Tim. Yeah.
No. I mean, it's hero's journey, which in his. Just no, stop moving. The hero's journey, which is he's trying to empower the guys to teach others how to tell their stories and to transition from their military life to their civilian life and to learn about that narration, right? To be the owner of their own narration.
So check out Scott's charity, Hero's Journey. And for more podcasts and for more exciting stuff, and to join SEFRA, to go down to Haiti and work on the seed bank, go to Spartan.com/podcast. Check it all out. Support us, share it, subscribe, make it happen.
Thank you for watching another epic story of success. If you like our message, please share Spartan Up with your friends and subscribe on iTunes, YouTube, or wherever you catch our show, maybe in the woods. Spartan Up is brought to you by Spartan Race. To find a race near you, visit Spartan.com.